Hello, fabulous. I am Dr. Brooke and so excited you are joining me for episode 4 of Your Body Speaks. We're going to be speaking about stress and its silent impact on your health today. But before I get started, I do want to quickly recap episode 3, where we spoke about recognizing the early signs that your body gives off and how to address those when those signs do show up. Now, 3 of the easily missed or easily ignored, however you want to think about that, ones we spoke about was sneezing, generalized achiness in the body, and excessive fatigue outside of just not having a good night's sleep, but sleeping well and still feeling really tired. What those 3 things mean and what the body is actually trying to tell you. So I don't want to belabor these points here on this episode because we got a lot of content to get into. But if you missed that episode, be sure to link back to episode 3 and get that information. It was a great episode and well received from my entire community and the people outside of my community as well. That being said, before we dive headfirst into this topic of stress, I do think it's very important to really share with you that the word stress in and of itself is not telling you much of anything. Now, I remember being in grad school early on and coming across this word that said eustress, E-U stress. And I'm like, what in the world is that? I've never seen that term. Growing up, you hear, I'm so stressed out. I'm so stressed out. I got stressed. Stress, right? In the mainstream, we hear that a lot. And eustress actually is a positive stress response, a stress response that motivates and improves people's performance. So think about sports, think about when you're getting married, starting a new job. Those are all kind of stresses, eustresses that really get you going, get you motivated, get you moving. These are short term. Eustress is very short term, right? We're not always starting a new job. We're not always getting married. We're not always having a sports performance. We're not always doing a dance recital or a choir recital. We're not always doing these things in our lives. Those are short term, eustress. Now, the one on the opposite end of that, where everybody associates the word stress with, is actually the word distress. Now, distress is a negative stress response that actually can leave you feeling overwhelmed, drained, so tired, so melancholy, so sad, like all of these things. And distress is actually a feeling of lack of control. So the stressor in your life, whether it's financial, whether it's stress about a potential relationship or a relationship falling apart, bad things happening at your job, bills overdue, whatever those stresses are, those things can cause a negative feeling in your body, and your body interprets it like a threat. Examples of this, beyond the ones that I just gave, is people receiving a diagnosis of some medical uncertainty, right? They're facing some sort of medical uncertainty. And so that triggers this stress response in their body. Now, because the term stress is primarily known in the negative context, I'm just going to drop the distress and continue on the rest of the podcast episode using the word stress. But I just thought it was really important to kind of just give you a little nugget, not that it was that important, but to give you a little nugget of the fact that the word stress in and of itself doesn't actually tell you much of anything. Is it eustress? Is it distress? What is it, right? But in this case, we are going to be talking about distress and what distress does to your body. Now, simply from a physiological standpoint, stress is the overproduction of the hormone cortisol. Cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands. Anatomical term for your kidneys, we know them as kidneys, are actually called the renals. So adrenal is the adrenal gland that sits on top of the kidney, the renal. So adrenal. Another word thing for you there, but that's just where the word adrenal comes from, is that it sits on top of the kidneys. So there's these tiny little glands that sit on top of the kidneys that are in charge of so many processes inside the body. And these adrenal glands receive signal from the brain that there is some imminent danger that's happening to them, and so, or happening to the system, to the body. So these adrenal glands secrete this cortisol through the bloodstream, and it is either our way of either fighting our way through, running from it, or freezing to not move. The other thing is cortisol is an important hormone for our sleep cycles and the natural rhythm of life. So cortisol in healthy amounts are good. Cortisol in unhealthy amounts is bad. We don't want unhealthy amounts of cortisol. We want healthy amounts of cortisol running through the body, because this actually keeps the healthy cycle of flow going. It is the hormone that wakes us up in the morning naturally. Cortisol spikes in the morning, and then it kind of tapers down as it goes throughout the day. We do need healthy levels of cortisol in our body. We need healthy cortisol in our body, healthy levels of cortisol in our body for mobility, for blood sugar balance, for libido, for our sleep cycles, for our immune system, just to name a few. But what happens when cortisol gets all out of balance? Common signs of cortisol in elevated doses in the body is this excessive ring of body fat around our waist. Especially as females, we carry a lot of our what I call a cortisol belly, what a lot of health professionals call the cortisol belly, is this just ring of fat on our bellies that we carry. And it's the one place that women are constantly talking about. I just wish I could get it off right here. The reason the body does this is biologically, if we are running from a tiger, if we are fighting for our lives, if we are freezing, like in a standstill, in a state of like scared cat motion, we need fuel to get this blood pumping through our body. We need fuel. We need energy to be able to sustain the run. The problem is your body does not know if it's going to be running from that tiger for a mile, for 20 minutes, for a couple hours, for maybe a few days. It does not know. So what it's doing is it is reserving fuel sources, fat cells, fat for fuel, abdomen area, so that it can actually sustain, like keep itself going, because who knows when we're going to be able to eat again, right? When we're in that state of like fight, flight, freeze, we don't want to eat. That's the last thing our body is actually thinking about, because we need to save our lives. We need to run, 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 run. And this is actually an area where I tell my patients, and it's an interesting concept, is this is an area where I feel like we've actually kind of de-evolved as a human race. If you think about grandparents upon grandparents upon grandparents, many, many generations ago, when, grandfathers were out hunting and doing what they needed to do to bring back food for the camp or for their family, or what they were doing, right? When they would go out and take care of all that kind of stuff, they were running for their lives, essentially hiding in trees, doing what they needed to do to make sure that they did not become prey to whatever animals they were dealing with, right? And they would bring the food back to base camp, and the dinner would be prepared. They would eat, they would relax, they would come back, everything was fine. So they went into this fight flight stage, and then they went into a rest and digest stage, and then they would go back out and back and forth, right? This ebb and flow. And God designed our bodies beautifully with that autonomic nervous system, where we have two branches of fight, flight, rest, and digest, fight, flight, rest, and digest. There's a reason we have both of those. But with common society right now, where we exist today, where we have computers, where we have cars, where we are coffee shops and dinner places, we're not constantly running from threats in our lives anymore, not in the same way that they used to, right? But this is where I think we de-evolved, is that we literally could be standing inside a Starbucks in line waiting to get our coffee and be processing thoughts in our mind where we're like, oh my gosh, did I get my kid to soccer practice? Did such and such get their stuff? Did this happen? Oh my gosh. What about this work? Oh, my coworker said that. We're constantly dealing with all these thoughts in our mind that can almost like show up as intrusive thoughts. They're taking over our entire physiological body. So we have our heart start pumping. We start maybe sweating. We start feeling very like anxious in our body, and we're just in line at a Starbucks. Like, what danger is there, right? But this is kind of an area where I feel like we have de-evolved as a population because that autonomic nervous system is getting triggered so easily because we're operating at a higher level closer to threshold. So for those of you watching, you can see that I have my hands placed about, right at my head level. If that is threshold and we're operating at a higher level than baseline, which would be around my eyes, and we're even just the slightest bit stressed, that's already like going up, hitting threshold before we've experienced any major stress. So our baseline has started to increase over time where we begin to adapt to these higher levels of stress, to the point that I have patients telling me today even that, well, that's so bizarre. I don't feel stress in my body. You're telling me I have high cortisol. I don't feel it. Well, that's because their baseline is higher than it actually should be for healthy function in the body. So we don't always want to be tipping off that threshold. All of that to say, this excessive ring of body fat around our bellies, the cortisol belly, is a result of this state of like preserving fuel because we don't know how long we're going to be running from. It's the body adapting. Remember, I've shared so many times over how wise and intelligent your body is, and how beautifully designed it is to do these things. Sometimes we feel like it's working against us by like, why do we have this little tire around us? We don't want this tire around us. Get this tire out of here, right? But it is actually working for us. We just have to learn how to work with it so that we can help talk to it, right? Developing that intimate relationship with your body to say, look, I understand you're feeling stressed. We're not in imminent danger. We're going to make it. We're going to be okay. And then doing all of the other stress techniques or de-stress techniques that I'm going to share with you later on in this episode. So another common sign of stress in the body is puffiness in the face. So the face just being like excessively like puffy. Sometimes it can show up as like skin conditions, not your typical eczema or psoriasis, but just different types of skin, just like, skin being really dry, or just skin not looking healthy. That can be a sign of cortisol, too much cortisol in the body. Achiness in your joints. Cortisol does affect every single ligament in the body, and all of your joints have ligaments attaching there, right? Ligaments attach bone to bone. So wherever there's bones that are attaching together, there's ligaments there. Achiness in those joints or in those ligaments, because cortisol is impacting that and causing them to be more lax, like a stretched out rubber band that no longer has the elasticity in it. Those are like how the joints are with too much cortisol in the body. So those could be, yes, inflammation is definitely an aspect of joint pain, but how much of that inflammation is just being reset over and over and over with those higher levels of cortisol? Frequent colds, frequent illnesses, getting sick all the time outside of quote unquote sick season. Those are all states of high levels of cortisol in the body. The inability to properly heal. So maybe you fall down and scrape your leg, or you get a bruise, or something happens and it just takes a very, very long time for it to heal. Those are signs of high cortisol in your body. If you have difficulty staying asleep, So you're waking up in the middle of the night and with just this shot of energy, that's high cortisol in your body. It's waking you up too early, right? I mentioned earlier that the spike of cortisol in your system is what wakes you up in the morning. That should not be spiking at 2 a.m. That should not be spiking at 4 a.m. Like anywhere between 5:36 and sometimes people who go to bed later and have those cycles, but it should not be spiking before 4 a.m. for anybody. If you have dizziness upon standing, so you're sitting in a position and you stand up and you're like, woo, feel really lightheaded, that's because part of the adrenal gland's job is to push blood up to the brain. And if they're in dysfunction and they're not able to like work properly because they're just like, whoa, we got to like push all this cortisol out because we're in imminent danger, they're not going to be doing all of their other jobs, all of the other work that they need to be doing. So stress affects every single person differently. Every single person differently. And if you have learned one thing in the 4 episodes so far of Your Body Speaks, is I am very adamant about people knowing that they are different from their brothers, girlfriends, sisters, brother, blah, 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 all those people, right? The little link down the line, they're different from all of those people. So what really matters is figuring out, okay, if you do have high cortisol in your body, what does your body respond to best in terms of the quote unquote stress management techniques? Now, I'm going to get into some of those stress management techniques with you today, but I just wanted to share with you that stress does affect each person differently. And I mentioned the patient and multiple patients, not just this particular one, but multiple patients who tell me they don't feel stress. That's because their baseline is way extremely high and they don't feel stress until all of a sudden, boom, then they do. And it's like the whole house fell down. Have you guys seen the meme? And I'm going to try to explain it for those people who aren't visually watching this. If I can find it, I'm going to actually put it into the video. But the meme, it's a little dog and he's sitting in a kitchen and all around him, it's a cartoon puppy and he has a coffee cup in his hand. And the entire kitchen around him is burning down. There's flames everywhere. Even like the table, the wooden table he's like sitting at is like on fire. His chair's about to be on fire. And he's sitting there and the words across the top of the picture is, everything's going to be fine. And I laugh at that every time I see it, because is that not true life? Like a lot of times we feel like our world is burning down, the house is burning down, all this stuff is happening, stress, 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 stress. And we're just there like with the smile on our face, like everything's going to be fine. Like meanwhile, like freaking out inside. And I think about that because what cortisol, I use this analogy a lot with patients, is think about cortisol as the lighter fluid. So a flame gets started like with some sort of stress in your system and your brain sends off a signal to start the fire, right? Like, hey, we got some issues here. Something's happening. Cortisol comes in and it acts like lighter fluid. It is literally just like basically making more flames in the body. And it's designed to help us. The reason why we have cortisol spikes is because cortisol is actually, this is what it's doing. Let me tell you this. Cortisol in the body is releasing glucose into the blood. Why does glucose need to be in the blood? Because blood is getting shunted to your arms and to your legs because you need to run. There is danger ahead. You are going to be running from this. We don't know how long, but cortisol is get us running, get us running, get us running. Heart starts beating really fast. All of these kind of things. This is what the adrenal glands is doing what it's being told to do. It's going, hey, yeah, there's danger. Let me get this cortisol through the system. They're not trying to work against you. It's not like it's trying to burn the house down, but it is burning the house down. And when there's cortisol in such dysregulated amounts, it will cause so many other problems. And so in working with patients with these elevated levels of cortisol, sometimes I feel like we're tires stuck in the mud unless we're actually doing good stress management techniques that work for their body and for them, because we've got this house lit on fire and we're trying to, oh, let's deal with a leaky gut. We can't deal with a leaky gut. We've got high cortisol. I'm sorry. Like, yes, you have gut pain. I'm not trying to be heartless and senseless and not, but your body wants to prioritize, or your body is prioritizing the cortisol because it realizes, oh my gosh, I can't function in this state. I can't heal in this state. Let's bring this down. Okay. So that being said, all of this, everything I just spoke about right now, I want to talk about some of the holistic ways that we can manage stress. Of course, pharmaceuticals, there's anti-anxiety medication. There's a lot of different things people can do in a medical model. You are not that person. We use medication when necessary, but we will do all of the other things to support our system where we can in the most holistic kind of way. And I know that that's the kind of person you are listening to this episode. So the biggest one that helps reduce stress effectively, if you think about what I was just saying earlier about blood being shunted to the arms, to the legs, getting your heartbeat going, your body is preparing to run. So why not go out for a brisk walk? You don't necessarily need to run if you're not a big runner. Some people do go run, and that's great if that works for them. But for an average patient, for an average person, running may not be their thing. So go out for a brisk walk, meaning don't just be casually walking like you would do through a mall, but like walk as if there was some intention around getting some exercise. That's what I mean by brisk walking. That is also getting your big quad muscles in your thighs going, which are muscles that actually help burn blood sugar, getting blood sugar into the tissue and out of the blood, so we don't end up with a blood sugar issue. I mentioned to you how cortisol will release sugar into the blood because it needs fuel to burn, right? But if we're walking and we're doing that, we're getting the sugar into the tissue, we're doing things correctly. The other thing we can do is be mindful of our breathing. A breathing pattern technique that I like and I share a lot is the 4-7-8 breathing method. This is 4-second inhale, 7-second hold, and then an 8-second exhale. So the exhale is going to be twice as long as the inhale. And the reason being for that is that longer exhale actually puts you into your parasympathetic mode, which parasympathetic is your rest and digest mode. And that's where we need to be to bring these levels of cortisol down, to tell the body we are okay. There is no danger. There's no threat. We're going to be fine. When you get back from that brisk walk, another thing that you can do these in conjunction with one another. If it's not feasible in the moment with where you're at in your day to day in these moments, another thing you can do is eat a nutrient rich meal. So when I say nutrient rich meal, it doesn't have to be of any size. I know for some people, if you're anything like me, when you are in those high states of stress, it's almost like your body does not want food. It does not want to eat, which is not a good thing either. We do need to give it some calories. And this is not eating Starburst or Skittles or cookies or crackers or things like that. But when I say nutrient dense, like have some veggies, have some protein. One of the snacks that I like to keep around at most times, I do have it around, is the little beef jerky sticks or little turkey sticks, to just have a protein source ready and on hand just to help balance the blood sugar. So that's important. The other thing that is important is for stress management is electrolytes. Having electrolytes helps support the adrenal glands. A brand that I really, really like, I will put a link in the bio. You guys know, well, for most of you listening, you do know that I don't recommend products or supplements for the most part on my podcast or in any of my newsletters or anything when I'm not working on a one-on-one with patients, because there is no one size fits all. And just because it's like, well, this works for everybody needs to do it. But one product I do really like is LMNT sparkling electrolyte water. They got 4 different flavors. It's one of my favorites. I like drinking while I'm working with patients and I get my electrolytes in. If you do have unregulated high blood pressure, having electrolytes every single day is not necessarily a good thing. Having electrolytes every once in a while is beneficial. So not an issue having electrolytes on an occasional basis with high blood pressure, but definitely don't want to be taking in all of that sodium like day after day after day. The other thing is stop overdosing on caffeine. Stop it. Having coffee, tea, energy drinks, and so forth just to keep yourself alive throughout the day because you're not sleeping well because of all this stuff, you're just perpetuating the cycle. And then you're just making cortisol stay where it is and maybe even get higher and so forth. And we're just cycling through, and that's not helpful at all. Some of the other things that you can do, because I was mentioning how a lot of times our mind will take over and a lot of intrusive thoughts come in and a lot of anxiety is produced. We need to figure out in those states. So one thing that I found out for myself throughout my years is that there's a lot of emotion going on in my body. I need to write it out. I need to like word dump on a page. That's what I call it, vomiting on a page, to just get it out. So this is like unfiltered thoughts, not thinking about what I'm writing, but just writing and just barfing on the page, right? And getting it there so that I'm like able to actually process through those emotions. Because also one thing that happens in the body, and I think this is really important to note, is that when we are in these high states of stress, high states of cortisol, our prefrontal cortex, this executive function area of our brain, this is what makes us unique from all the other mammals. Humans have this executive functioning of our brain. This portion shuts off when we're in a high state of stress. So we're no longer like logical or rational or reasoning and working through things. We're just in, again, survival mode. And that's not a place to be making big decisions from. We have to stop. We have to, like, in my case, what I was sharing with you, it's a technique that's worked for me. So this is figuring out what works for you. But a lot of times just being able to like word vomit that on a page, I can then kind of look back as I get everything out, you know, purge in a way, and then look at it and go, okay, well, what is the core issue here? What do I need to deal with, and who do I need to speak with to work this through? And this is a process of sharing if you did get offended, or if you did get hurt, or if something is stressing you out because somebody said something. Why carry that weight on you when you can have a conversation, not in a nasty way, but in a way where you're calm and you're collected, and you can say, look, so-and-so, like what you said yesterday really hurt my feelings and it's had me in a state of stress, or this coworker, you did X, Y, and Z to me. I know you probably didn't mean any harm. I know it probably whatever you're sharing your heart, you're giving the other person an opportunity to tell you what really happened on their end. Maybe they didn't interpret it that way. So those things cause stress to our bodies. That causes more stress, I think, the emotional, mental turmoil than even some of the physical stuff. So really finding your voice and journaling, speaking, figuring out that. The other thing that works for me is prayer. I do spend time in prayer, and I believe it's been super, super impactful in my life over the last 2 years, even. If meditation works for you, just quieting your mind, getting those thoughts flushed through, like visualizing just being purged of all the ick, all the things that are causing you stress, so you can actually like process and work through it. And the final piece, this is more of a physical one. Well, this is a physical one, is the actual neurolymphatic reflex point for the adrenal glands. This is a specific point on the body that helps support the adrenal glands when you get it stimulated. I will put the link for the tutorial video for this in the show notes, but the reflex point, you would go from your navel, you go 2 inches up, so like up your abdomen, and you're going to go 1 inch out. So when you're activating these points, and like you'll know you're on the right spot if the sides of your finger are hitting up against your rib cage. You shouldn't be directly on your rib cage, but as you're stimulating those points, 2 inch up, 1 inch out on either side. So going out to the left, out to the right, and stimulating those points, you'll be hitting up against the rib cage, and that's how you'll know you're on the right spot. So doing it for 20 seconds a few times a day can help, like, just really kind of settle a little bit of the adrenal gland dysfunction and really help keep things going. Yay! All that being said, there was a lot of information there, I know, but as always, I really do hope that you feel that this information was helpful, that you can apply it, that you feel more empowered as you learn more about your body and different things that we're talking about on this show. If you would be so kind as to leave a review, share it, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching it there. This way we can get this out to more people, get this information in the hands of other people so that they can be empowered to know that their body is so incredibly intelligent and wise and beautiful by design, right? So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending your time with me and taking this journey with me. So next episode, we're going to actually be talking about the uncommon knowledge of the body and interesting things you may not know about it. So things that you'll be able to kind of hear and learn about and educate yourself around about in episode 5. And we'll be able to like unpack all that so that when you are in situations, you're like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what Dr. Brook was talking about. So I don't mean to sound mysterious about that, but be sure to catch the next episode. And in the meantime, let's put the cortisol fire out this week by utilizing all of those beautiful techniques, stress techniques I gave you. And here's some more healthier moments on healthier moments on healthier moments. Until next time, I will talk to you later.